3 years ago, I found out that the two people I trusted most in the world had been lying to me for months. I didn't learn it through a text message or a phone call. I walked through my own front door. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. I remember because I'd left work early. My boss had sent everyone home after the office HVAC broke down, and the building was basically a sauna by 2 in the afternoon. I was actually in a good mood driving home. I was thinking about ordering Thai food, maybe opening a bottle of wine, maybe surprising my fiancé with an early night in. I had my keys in my hand before I even reached the door. I remember thinking the lights were on, which was normal. My fiancé, Daniel, worked from home on Tuesdays. I remember thinking I could hear voices, which also seemed normal at first. It wasn't normal. My best friend Mara was standing in my living room. Daniel was next to her. And the way they jumped apart when they heard the door, the way she looked at me, I knew before either of them said a single word. I want to say I screamed or cried or threw something. Honestly, I just stood there. My keys were still in my hand. The Thai food app was still open on my phone. I looked at Mara, this woman I had known since we were 19 years old, my college roommate, the person who sat with me in the hospital when my mom had her knee surgery, the person whose name was on my emergency contact form at work, and I thought, I don't know you at all. I didn't say much. I asked them both to leave. Mara tried to talk to me, and I held the door open and didn't look at her. Daniel tried to tell me it wasn't what I thought, and I remember the sound of my own voice saying, very quietly, "Please get out of my apartment." He did. I sat on my kitchen floor for a long time after that. Not crying, just sitting. In the weeks that followed, I found out the affair had been going on for 4 months. I found out through a mutual friend who felt guilty keeping it, not through Daniel, and not through Mara. Daniel sent me a letter, an actual handwritten letter, which under any other circumstance might have seemed romantic, apologizing and asking if we could talk. I didn't respond. I gave back his ring through a mutual friend. I transferred the lease to my name alone and changed the locks. Mara called me 7 times in the first week. She sent emails. She sent a card, an actual greeting card, the kind you buy at CVS, with a handwritten note inside that said she hoped I could forgive her someday because she never meant for any of this to happen. I read it once. I put it in a recycling bin. She didn't try to contact me after that. Neither did Daniel. I won't pretend the next year was easy. It wasn't. I was 32 years old. I had just ended a 4-year relationship, and I had also lost the person I considered my closest friend. The grief felt split in an ugly way. Half of me missed Daniel, half of me was furious at myself for missing him, and underneath all of it was the particular kind of hurt that only comes from a best friend's betrayal. The kind that makes you replay every conversation, every coffee, every time she'd sat across from me and smiled while knowing what she was doing. But I kept going. I'd like to say I had some grand moment of clarity, some scene where I stood in front of a mirror and decided to choose myself. The truth is more boring than that. I just kept showing up to work. I started running in the mornings, not because I was inspired, but because I needed somewhere to put the energy. I started cooking actual meals instead of ordering delivery every night. I called my sister more. I let people at work take me out for drinks on Fridays. And slowly, not dramatically, not all at once, I started to feel like myself again. 18 months after that Tuesday in October, I met Elliot. It happened the way a lot of things happen when you're not looking for them. A colleague of mine was leaving the company and threw himself a going-away happy hour at a bar in Midtown. I almost didn't go. I was tired, I had a report due the next morning, and honestly, I wasn't in a great headspace that week. But my coworker had been kind to me during the hard months. So I went. Elliot was there because he and my coworker had gone to grad school together. He was sitting at the end of the bar, looking slightly out of place in the way that some people do at parties. Present, paying attention, but not performing. We ended up talking for 3 hours. Not about anything remarkable. He asked me what I was reading. I asked him about his work. He ran a small urban planning consultancy, which I knew nothing about, and he talked about it the way people do when they genuinely love something. I missed my last train and took an Uber home and texted my sister that night saying I just met someone I think I might actually like. We dated for a year and a half before he proposed. He did it in our apartment on a Sunday morning. No restaurant, no audience, no elaborate setup. Just coffee and a ring box on the kitchen counter, and him saying, I've been trying to figure out the right moment for 6 weeks, and I think maybe there isn't a right moment, so I'm just going to do it now. It was the most him thing he could have done. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We got engaged in April. By June, we were deep in the planning venue deposits, catering tastings, the whole exhausting, beautiful machinery of it. One of the events on our calendar that summer was the annual fundraising gala for the literacy nonprofit I'd been involved with for 2 years. It was a big deal. Black tie, held at a hotel ballroom in the city, 250 guests, the kind of event that takes months to pull together. I was on the planning committee. Elliot had agreed to come as my date. I did not think about the fact that Mara might be there. I should have. She worked in nonprofit PR. She had actually introduced me to the organization years earlier, which was its own particular irony. But I hadn't seen her in almost 2.5 years, and I suppose I'd started to feel like our lives had simply separated, the way lives do sometimes, quietly and without ceremony. I was wrong about that. I saw her before she saw me. She was standing near the bar with a group of people I half recognized, some faces from the nonprofit world. A couple of people I knew from the early days of my involvement with the organization. She was wearing a dark green dress, and she looked well. That was the first thing I noticed, and I registered it with a strange kind of neutrality. Not bitterness, just observation. She looked well. I considered. Briefly. Avoiding her entirely. The ballroom was large enough. I had enough people to talk to, enough committee duties to hide behind. But even as I thought it, I knew I wasn't going to do that. I was 35 years old. I was happy. I wasn't going to spend the evening mapping the room to avoid someone. So when she turned and saw me, I didn't look away. I gave a small nod. She looked startled, more startled than the situation called for, I thought, and then she made her way over. Adeline, she said. That's my name. Adeline. People who know me well call me Addie. She used to call me Addie. Hi, Mara, I said. There was a pause. The kind of pause that has a lot of history in it. You look wonderful, she said. She seemed to mean it, which almost made it harder. Thank you, I said. You too. And that might have been the end of it. Polite, brief, survivable. Except that her boyfriend appeared beside her then. I didn't know him. He seemed pleasant enough, smiled, and introduced himself, and then Mara said in the tone people use when they're trying to fill silence, So, how have you been? Are you still at the foundation, or I'm on the planning committee, I said. I've been here since 7. Right, yes, of course, she said. And, personally, are you? I'm great, I said. Simply, honestly. She nodded. Then something shifted in her face, some decision being made, and she said, I heard you were seeing someone. I looked at her. I am? That's good, she said. And then with a smile that was just slightly too pointed to be kind, Daniel and I ran into each other a few months ago, actually. He mentioned he'd tried to reach out to you and never heard back. I think he really did want to apologize properly. I noticed she said Daniel and I ran into each other the way you mentioned something you want the other person to notice you mentioning. That's fine, I said. I got his letter. I just didn't have anything I needed to say. Mara's boyfriend drifted away toward the bar, and I think part of her wished she'd gone with him, but she stayed. And then she said something that I've thought about since, not because it hurt me, but because of what it revealed about her. I just think, she said, lowering her voice slightly, that you gave up on something real because of one mistake. I know that's not what you want to hear, but Daniel loved you, Addie. He really did, and I think you've been running from that. I looked at her for a moment. The ballroom hummed around us. Somewhere behind me, the string quartet was transitioning into something I half recognized. You called me Addie, I said. She blinked. You haven't done that in 2.5 years, I said, because we're not friends anymore. And I think part of you knows that, and part of you is standing here right now, hoping that being at the same event means we can just quietly slide back to what things were. And I think the reason you brought up Daniel is because you want me to absolve you of something. I said it without heat. Just facts. I'm not going to do that, Mara. Not because I'm still angry. I'm honestly not. But because I don't owe it to you. Her face had gone through several expressions by the time I finished. She settled on something that looked like dignity, and I respected her for it. "I understand," she said. "I hope you're doing well," I said. "And I meant that too." She nodded and moved away. I found Elliot at the edge of the room near the windows. He was talking to someone from the board, a conversation that looked substantive and that he seemed genuinely engaged in. That was one of the things I loved about him, the way he was actually present at these things rather than just enduring them. I waited until the conversation reached a natural pause and then touched his arm, and he turned and looked at me the way he always does, like whatever he was doing before was less interesting than I am. "How are you doing?" he asked quietly, because he knows me. "Good," I said. And I was. I was actually genuinely good. He put his hand on my back and turned back to the conversation, and I stood next to him and looked out at the room, the tables with their white linens and low flower arrangements, the committee members I'd spent months working alongside, the quiet satisfaction of an event that was going well, and I felt the specific peace of someone who has come a long way and knows it. About an hour later, I was standing near the registration table when I heard Mara's voice carrying across the space. She was talking to someone I didn't recognize, and she had that particular social energy people get when they're performing comfort, louder than necessary, slightly too much laughter. I caught a fragment. "It's just such a small world, I swear. You can't go anywhere in this city without running into someone you know." And then I heard the other voice respond, and I looked up. The man Mara was talking to was Elliot. I watched for a moment. I could see from his expression that they were strangers making small talk. He had the polite attentiveness of someone who has just been introduced to a person and is being courteous. Mara was talking, gesturing, doing the thing she does at events. And then she said something, and Elliot said something back, and she laughed, and then she asked what I assume was the standard party question. "And what do you do?" Elliot told her. He mentioned his firm. He mentioned briefly the city redevelopment project he'd been leading on the west side, a fairly significant contract, the kind that had been in the local papers a few times that year. I saw the moment she placed it. The recognition crossed her face clearly enough that I could read it from 15 feet away. She knew the project. She'd pitched her PR firm for a piece of that contract 2 years ago and hadn't gotten it. And she was now realizing, I could see her realizing, that the man standing in front of her, who had just mentioned being there with his fiancé on the planning committee, was with me. She turned and found my face in the room. I didn't smirk. I didn't make a face. I just looked back at her, and then I looked at Elliot, and Elliot looked across the room at me and raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" And I smiled at him. He excused himself from the conversation and came over, and I put my hand through his arm. "Do you know her?" he asked, low, as we moved away toward the reception tables. "We used to be close," I said. He nodded, and I could tell he understood, more than I said, the way he usually does. "She seemed thrown," he said. "Yeah," I said. "I noticed. We went to find our seats for dinner. The evening was beautiful. The fundraiser exceeded its goal. I gave a short speech as a committee member and didn't fumble it, and afterward a woman I'd admired for years told me I'd been the best speaker of the night, and Elliot squeezed my hand under the table. On the way home, we took a cab rather than the subway because we were both tired and it was late and we'd been on our feet for hours. The city moved past the windows, all lit up and indifferent, and Elliot leaned back in the seat and closed his eyes and held my hand in his lap. I thought about Mara. Not with anger, not even with much sadness, just with the particular quiet that comes after something is genuinely finished. I thought about the person I was 3 years ago, sitting on her kitchen floor, how small and fractured and disbelieving everything felt, how impossible it seemed that I would ever feel okay again, let alone good, let alone this. I thought about how you can lose something that felt permanent and survive it. How survival turns into recovery, and recovery turns, slowly, into something you didn't expect, a life you actually chose, rather than one that just happened to you. I didn't need Mara to see Elliot and understand what she'd lost by betraying me. I didn't need that moment to feel complete, but I won't pretend it didn't mean something. Just a little. Not because of what she saw, but because of what I saw. Myself, reflected back in her expression. Someone she didn't expect. Someone I wouldn't have become if she hadn't done what she did. The cab crossed the bridge and I watched the water below catch the light. "Hey," Elliot said, without opening his eyes. "What are you thinking about?" "Nothing important," I said. He made a small sound, the kind that means he doesn't quite believe me, but isn't going to push. "Are you happy?" he asked. I looked at him, his eyes still closed, relaxed, trusting, genuinely curious about the answer. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." He smiled. The city kept going. And I meant every word. I've thought a lot about what actually happened that night at the gala. Not the moment Mara's face went still when she realized who Elliot was, but the part that came before it. The part where I stood in front of her and said what I said, calmly, without my voice shaking, and then walked away. That's the part I keep coming back to. Because here's what I know now, that I didn't know. 3 years ago, sitting on my kitchen floor at 32 with my keys still in my hand, the way things end up isn't random. It's not luck. It's the accumulated weight of every choice you make after the thing that breaks you. Mara made her choices. Daniel made his. And then, slowly, so did I. I chose to let them leave without a scene. I chose to return the ring through someone else, rather than in a moment of anger I'd regret. I chose to show up to work the next Monday and the Monday after that. None of those felt like powerful decisions at the time. They felt like survival. But survival, repeated long enough, becomes something else. It becomes a foundation. What I understand now is that character isn't built in the big dramatic moments. It's built in the Tuesday nights when you order dinner for one and eat it without crying. It's built in the Saturday mornings when you go for a run, not because you feel strong, but because moving your body is the only honest thing you know how to do. Integrity isn't a statement you make. It's a practice. Something you either keep doing or you don't. Mara was talented. She was funny. She was the kind of person who could walk into a room and make everyone feel immediately at ease. I don't say that to be generous. I say it because it's true, and because I think it mattered to her in the wrong way. She wanted things. There's nothing wrong with wanting things. But somewhere along the way, she decided that wanting something badly enough was justification enough to take it. That's the mistake, not the wanting. The believing that desire excuses the method. The thing about that kind of thinking is that it doesn't stop. She took Daniel, and eventually Daniel wasn't enough, and she'd moved to the next thing she decided she deserved. I don't know what her life looks like now. I genuinely don't. But I know that the people who build their lives on what they've taken from others don't end up with something that holds. And I know this in my body, not just my head, that Elliot and I have what we have because I didn't let what happened to me make me someone I wasn't. I was angry for a long time. I was sad for longer. But I didn't become cruel, or closed, or convinced that everyone was going to hurt me. I stayed open, even when it was stupid to. I let my coworker drag me to a going-away party on a night I wanted to stay home. I talked to a stranger at a bar for 3 hours because he asked what I was reading and actually waited for the answer. Intelligence isn't just knowing things. It's knowing which things to hold on to and which things to put down. I put down the version of my life that was built on sand. The engagement, the friendship, the whole structure that had a fracture running through it, I hadn't let myself see, and I picked up something slower, quieter, more real. That's what I want people to take from this. Not that things work out in the end, because sometimes they don't, and I won't pretend otherwise, but that who you are in the hard stretch, the long, unglamorous middle where nobody's watching and nothing's resolved, that's what determines everything that comes after. I was 35 years old at that gala, engaged to a man who proposed on a Sunday morning with coffee going cold on the counter, on a committee I'd given 2 years of evenings to, because I believed in the work. None of it looked like what I thought my life would look like at 32. It was better. And Mara saw that. Whatever she felt in that moment, she saw it. I don't need her to understand what she lost. I just needed to understand what I found.